Welcome to the Inside Carolina Coast to Coast podcast. I'm your host, Jon Seiglie. I'm joined, as always, by Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran. We are sponsored by Giant T-Shirt and GiantT-Shirt.com, longtime sponsors of Inside Carolina, great friends to all Tar Heel fans out there. If you are listening to this podcast, whether that be on a podcast app or on YouTube, we here at Inside Carolina would just like to ask a humble request, if you wouldn't mind. Just take the time to give us a review and a rating, especially if you're listening on the iTunes podcast. If you feel that we deserve a 5-star rating, that would be great, because anything that we can get as far as ratings goes really helps grow the podcast. If you don't feel like we deserve a 5-star rating, let us know what we can do to fix things up. If you have any suggestions, we are always looking for ways to improve the pod as well. So that will do it about for me as far as the intro goes, because guys, we actually have basketball to talk about finally. It's not that much, but we have a little bit. There were several UNC commits and prospects that were involved in tournaments over the last few days. But we are going to start the podcast off talking about the big-time offer that went out, and that was to Jabari Smith. He is the power forward class of 2021 out of Georgia, and this was a big deal because Smith is currently the number 4 prospect, both on 247 and the composite. So, Sherrell, you actually wrote about Smith in the Scoop, which is a great feature. If you're listening to this podcast, make sure that you check that out on the Inside Carolina Premium Basketball message board. And then it turned out that just right after that, UNC went ahead and offered Smith. So since you had written all those words about him, Rel, I'm going to let you start off the podcast. What is your impression of Smith, and what makes him a top 5 prospect in the class of 2021?
Well, I'll let Sean get into the nitty-gritty basketball details about Smith. He's watched him more than I have. As far as North Carolina's recruitment of him, it's an offer we thought was going to come earlier this year. The North Carolina staff has seen him a couple of times. Bro Williams had been down to see him. Brad Frederick had been in the game where he played against Walker Kessler that we keep talking about from February, that really showed everyone kind of that not just only was he a really good, player in his class, but also he could outduel or I would say play as well as someone like Kessler, who was a top 20 freshman, going into college. So they've known about him, they've seen him, they've watched him. I don't know if maybe they've heard something about one of their guys or what necessitated the timing that he had on this one. It's a little surprising. I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was going to come earlier this year. As far as Smith as a player, like I said, I'll let Sean get into it, but I think, we've talked about a few times North Carolina not having that traditional power forward that, folks are used to them having. Tyler Zaylor played some for John Henson, all the way back to Antoine Jamison, Rasheed Wallace. All those guys to me are power forwards. Bryce Johnson, Isaiah Hicks, they haven't had that long, lanky, athletic type power forward. And I think Jabari Smith kind of would be the next in line for that role. I think he would fit in pretty well with what they have at center. I think the question with everybody that North Carolina is going to have is they sign at the 4, and whoever they play at the 4 is going to be, can they guard what we call hybrid forwards, kind of small ball forwards in college who turn into wings in the NBA. So I think that's the main question, and to me, the only question about Jabari Smith as a player and how he would fit in Carolina.
All right, Sean, you're teed up, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's probably almost a full year ago, I guess 51 weeks, when I last saw him in person. So that was at the last live period last year, an Adidas tournament. And I remember, asking his father about UNC, because I think we did a story on them for Inside Carolina. At the time, UNC had not reached out, but we always kind of figured he would be a person of interest. And sure enough, here we are in late July now, and he has an offer. In terms of guys in the class, I'd say, Hunter Sallis, I really like. Jabari Smith, obviously, is ranked highly, so it's not going out on a limb to like him, but he is very smooth, and I do really like his game. He's young for his age. I think he probably would have been playing on the U17s in terms of the USA team this year. But one of the things you notice about him, when I saw him, he was 6'8". I know now he's been listed at 6'9", 6'10", so it seems like he has grown a little bit. His dad's huge, I think 6'10", 6'11". But, for me, it was really his shot. So he's got a very tight formation or a form on his shot. And for him, he is he's going to be guarding the bigs, fours, fives on defense. But once again, he can play on the perimeter where he's a really good shooter. And he can handle off the dribble. So he can, he's not going to be dribbling the ball up the court and going ISO, but if somebody closes out, he can attack him with 1-2 dribbles, get to the lane for a dunk. He's also not afraid to play inside. Probably needs to put on a little bit of weight, but he'll get in the post. He has a nice fadeaway, a little turn over his shoulder. So from an offensive standpoint, I think he's very skilled and would be obviously a great addition. I think the question for him is how many bigs will be there when UNC's will be coming back. And right now, say there's 3. All 3 of those guys are, I'd say, more fives in terms of who they're gonna guard, and he's really that stretch 4, true 4 that can play. So, the other question is, does he go to the G League? Because he's a top 5 player. They're going to be offering him, the big money, the $400,000 plus, I would imagine. So it's a question of, does he end up in college? But in terms of personality and skill set, very high on him and think he would be a tremendous addition.
So I have a follow-up question for both of you guys, but Sherrell, I'll start with you. UNC is going after another top 10 recruit here, and several years ago, their record with those guys wasn't great. But Carolina seemed to really turn around during this last class. And even before then, I mean, they got Cole Anthony, who was a top, at least top 15. I'm pretty sure he was a top 10 player as well, if memory serves. So when you're looking at the recruitment of Smith, he's class of 2021. Recruiting is weird right now with the pandemic going on. But how do you see the Heels really being a player for him? Do you think that they will end up being one of his favorite schools down the stretch?
Yeah, I think they probably got some word that, hey, if you offer him, that he'll be interested. I doubt an offer to a top 5 player would have come this late. For those listening, I'm putting in quotations. A month and a half before his senior year of high school, I doubt would have come this late without some kind of understanding that they were actually truly in it. Now, as Sean said, you're not just competing against other schools anymore. So it's not just, hey, North Carolina is better than Georgia or Georgia Tech or Auburn or LSU or any of the SEC schools he has offers from. Is Carolina better than a chance of making $500,000 for a year before going into the NBA draft? So that is a complicating factor, I would say, in all the recruitments of top 10 guys moving forward. But I think they have a shot. I know Carolina fans don't want to hear this, but he does not have offers from Kentucky or Duke. So that is always a good thing. Because not yet. That's always a good thing because those are 2 formidable foes on the recruiting trail. His offers are pretty much all SEC, or the offers that he's entertaining, I should say, seem to be almost all SEC, all regional, all very Southeast oriented. So, there's I think they have a shot. It's just a matter of if he goes to college and how much they can convince him that the big stage of North Carolina, the lights shine a little brighter than some of the other schools that he's considering.
All right, good stuff there. So, Sean, my follow-up question to you was going to be, what do you think about what Sherrell was talking about, how if Smith is going to be playing the 4 in college, you saw him a year ago. He was obviously a lot less developed at that point. He's put on size, put on some height. But do you really see him as being able to guard those smaller 4s that have become so prevalent in college basketball?
Yeah, I definitely think he can. I mean, especially when looking at, who's going to probably be guarding the 4, coming out this year. And I think him playing the wing, being comfortable on the perimeter on offense will help him. I mean, just think of Duke, for instance. They always like playing a guy, the 3 up at the 4 and creating the mismatch problems because they're too quick, or the Duke player's too quick usually. And for him, I don't think that would be a problem in terms of guarding. Now, obviously, if he's getting bigger, maybe that affects it. But I think he'd be truly a guy that if a team's trying to go small, I mean, think Auburn in the tournament a few years ago with how athletic and how small they went. you put him in there, and that solves that problem right away because he can adapt to that, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
The other thing I lied when I said it was last July I saw him. I forgot I saw him at USA Basketball, and with how many players they have at USA Basketball these days, they split him into two gyms, and he was actually with the younger guys, so more the freshmen, sophomores, because he fit in.
Mm-hmm.
He still fit into that U17 because he was young, and him and Patrick Baldwin were just head and shoulders above everybody. So I wish I had seen him play against the older guys, but once again, I think with his shooting and just skill set, he's probably one of the more skilled offensive players in the class.
And there are people who know basketball really well who believe that ultimately he'll be a wing, when he gets to the NBA. So they
Wow.
see him. They see. Sean disagrees. I'm gonna let Sean go. I'm gonna let him go. But there are people who I've talked to, who we talked to, who really believe that high school 5, college 4, NBA 3. Now whether or
Jeez.
not he does that, we'll see. But they really believe that's that's the trajectory that he's taking.
Yeah, I know one of the comparisons was Tatum, and everybody has their different opinion, but I definitely did not agree with that. Just having watched Tatum a lot more than I have Smith, especially for Tatum growing up. And he, coming up, he was mostly playing point guard a good majority of the time. So he was kind of going up from a 1 to a 4 versus always harder going down.
Mm-hmm.
Then playing full time on the wing, you need to be pretty quick and athletic. So I think, even in the NBA, I see him playing that stretch 4, which I think still would be ideal given his size and shooting. So I see him playing on the wing, but at 3, I'm going to probably disagree with on that one.
Well, let me ask you guys this, and this will kind of wrap up the talk about Jabari Smith. What about a small ball 5? Because, if Roy does roll out that small lineup like he has shown in the last couple of seasons, do you think that Smith kind of has the rebounding prowess and the defensive ability to be a small ball 5 potentially in certain situations? What do you think about that, Rel?
In his 1 year in college, I probably wouldn't do that.
Hmm.
I think, again, and this isn't my analysis, this is from talking to people who've seen him play a good deal. Physicality and strength are still things that he has to improve upon. And so I don't know if I were a coach, I would feel comfortable having him kind of being the main guy in there by himself in the paint, because he's not a bruiser. This
Mm-hmm.
is a very skilled, athletic type player. I'm not saying he can't be a great rebounder, but I would probably I probably would still go with someone a little more rugged at the 5, and then keep him at the 4. That gives you a lot of versatility.
Gotcha.
Especially if you did have once again, who knows? In my head, I'm always thinking 3, but as I talked about in the Chet Holmgren fit, who know? One of the freshmen could have a really good year. Maybe Armando just wants to get paid in the G League. Or he has a breakout year. So you never know in terms of how many will be left, but I think there should be enough for him not to have to play a true 5. But then again, if you want to switch things up, I think he could for spot minutes.
All right, interesting stuff, guys. Well, we'll just have to see how Smith's recruitment goes over the next couple of months. Now turning to the basketball that hopefully a lot of Tar Heel fans were able to watch. There were a few games going on, like I alluded to earlier. One of them was a player that is near and dear to Sean's heart. Unfortunately for Sherrell, his favorite player is already arriving on campus, RJ Davis, so we can't talk about him this podcast, but there is his honorary mention, as we are contractually obligated to do now on every Coast to Coast podcast. But the recruits I wanted to talk with you guys about were at this point were Hunter Sallis and then Mark Mitchell. Mitchell is probably the name that Tar Heel fans are going to be less familiar with because he is a class of 22 out of Kansas. He is a small forward, but going to start the conversation with you for this one, Sean, because it looks like Sallis and Mitchell actually went head to head. What was that game, and what did you think of looking at their stats?
Well, this was a game. Initially, when I saw it came out, I was excited to watch. And have the Baller TV subscription, which I have my own issues with watching games on that, but unfortunately it was not on that one, and it was on another one which I hadn't heard of. Play Late, I think I don't even know, but tried to go on there, and it didn't look like they were even broadcasting on that one. So unfortunately, did not get to watch that one live like I was hoping to, because it seemed like it was a good one with Mark Mitchell kind of going coast to coast and hitting the game winner. And he finished with 24-7. Hunter Sallis had 18-6-4. So it seemed like a pretty good affair, and was able to follow kind of the Twitter accounts for both those games. But it definitely seems like Sallis impressed a lot of people, not only in that game but also Friday. And I know we talked about it before. Some websites have him a little higher. I still think he's going to be a top 10 guy in the class. And the game I was watching this morning was supposed to be Sallis versus Holmgren. I turned it on. It looked like Sallis' team was playing the B team, and it also looked like he was playing at 50% speed. It looked like he had a little bit of a limp from Saturday. So once again, not the best viewing opportunity, but overall, I think he impressed wholeheartedly over the weekend. And I think, in terms of Mark Mitchell, he's a guy I definitely want to watch more of, and I think is probably rated a little bit lower than he should be, just on, the guy's 6'8", once again, probably not a true 3, but he's very comfortable handling the ball, and very, he's a left-handed, so, but ambidextrous, amphibious, whatever you want to say. And, he's a kind of a grown man. I think he's, probably athleticism, in terms of his quickness, working on that a little bit, but you can see in the highlight him going coast to coast, starting on the right side, finishing on the left. And that, hopefully that game pops up online, because I think that would be a good one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Sallis is a player I know a lot of UNC fans have been following. He's obviously a huge want for that 2021 class. Mark Mitchell, though, out of 2022, just for some perspective, I mean, Sean, you said that he might even need to be higher rated. Currently, he's the 18th rated overall prospect in the junior class. So that's pretty high praise. Now, Rel, you wrote out a great piece on Inside Carolina, again, on the Premium Basketball message board, going through all of the details and nuance into Mark Mitchell's when he got the offer, his reaction to it, a lot of great quotes in there. So I encourage everyone to go on the Inside Carolina Premium Basketball message board and read that. But, it's I think the third or fourth total offer out to the class of 2022. And it's just interesting that those offers are going out. And really, it's good to see Mitchell playing against guys like Sallis and holding his own. But Sherrell, is there any sort of I don't want to say trepidation, but do you think that coaches are kind of maybe being a little bit more cautious with their offers unless it is someone that just looks truly elite, like Mitchell has shades of showing here?
I think that's exactly what UNC is doing. I think they're erring on the side of caution, and they're offering players who they know can be good. Now, there's all kind of caveats that go with that, like know they can be good in their system or know they can be good in this style. They're just like, okay, this guy can play basketball. We'll offer him and figure it out later. I think that's kind of what you see the UNC staff doing with 2022. And I mean, they told Mitchell that. I mean, he's been having conversations with Steve Robinson since the June 15th period started, when rising juniors could start receiving phone calls directly from coaches. The way it works now, for those who don't know, is that until June 15th, before your junior season, you can't have a coach call you directly. Now, you can call a coach as many times as you want to. So if Mark Mitchell wanted to call Roy Williams every single day, he could. But until June 15th, they can't call him. So once that happens, that kind of is a big tell about who North Carolina is interested in. And he said he talked to Robinson I think it was the next morning. He's been talking regularly with him. And then he talked to Roy Williams this past week, and that's when the offer came. So back to your original question. Yes, Sky Clark is an offer UNC is giving out in 2022. Really good player, can really score. Jaden Bradley, they've seen him a ton. They know him. Really good player. And now Mark Mitchell, it's kind of the same deal. And Steve Robinson watched him last summer. So this isn't a situation where they haven't seen him live. Steve Robinson watched his AAU team a good deal last summer, as well as Jaden Bradley. Sky Clark, I'm not sure about, but that's kind of where they're at. And I think we have to be kind of on our P's and Q's at Inside Carolina, because I think there's a few more, probably 4 or 5 other players who could get an offer during this podcast, or could get an offer tomorrow, because I think that's just what they're doing now is you can play basketball, we like you, we'll figure it out later.
Yeah, and Sean, I mean, I think it's really good that we're seeing some of these tournaments, and the hope is that these guys will continue to play. Are there any other names that kind of pop out to you that are some recruits that UNC may be following, or anyone else that you're trying to keep an eye on and hopefully they have games coming up?
So one guy in the 2022 class, another Midwest guy, Grady Dick from the Kansas area. He was on the KC Run GMC 16 and under team, and I know he played really well this weekend. I know his name's kind of been floated out there, so that could be an option. In terms of 2021, I think that's going to be interesting because we've talked about it of their offers, and I know we're going to talk about Caleb Houstan going forward, but there's a obviously what we think and what's reality could be totally different, but what we think is there's a handful of realistic candidates, and then the other ones that are we'll see what happens, and I feel like they're going to have to start expanding the 21 pool, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where they go, in that lens, instead of, continuing 2022. But I could definitely see, especially over the next week or two, you start seeing offers coming out, because if you think about it, we'd be finishing up the second live period and going into the third period. And, that's when a lot of action happens, or sometimes it's right after that third period happens. So I could definitely see the next few weeks some more names popping up.
Yeah, August is kind of the timeline I thought, just because by August I think we would know one way or the other whether or not there'd be any kind of evaluation period, and it just doesn't seem to be trending in that direction. So I think they have to jump in with offers soon, because some of these guys, Angelo Brizzi, who we've talked about for a while, came out with the top 8 and Carolina wasn't in it. Now that's not to say Carolina couldn't get in it with an offer, but some of the guys who maybe who they thought might wait a little while seem to be moving forward. So they're going to have to make some decisions here soon, or get some of the guys who we think maybe have them in their top group to go ahead and commit.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see just what happens with these classes. I mean, I agree with you guys. I think things are going to really start picking up with offers going out to 2022 and then class of 21 guys. I mean, who knows? We could start seeing some commitments from that class here soon.
Well, they're not Carolina related, but Matthew Cleveland, who I think is top 15 in 2021, is announcing on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that's one that could, we always talk about how there are dominoes with this thing. Say he picks. I'm gonna go on some hypotheticals here, okay? So he's a wing, right? So say he picks Kansas, and so does that make Kansas less desirable for Hernan Sallis? And if so, is Carolina, Kansas, Gonzaga his top 3? And if his second choice already has somebody kind of at a similar spot, does that push him to make a decision quicker? Again, not saying that's all the case. That's a hypothetical, but I think once these decisions start happening, then they tend to snowball.
Yeah, and especially with the elite guys. I mean, I think it's very telling that Coach Williams and the staff that they are not waiting around for these guys like Mark Mitchell, and especially if the player themselves is receptive to the pitch. Which, I mean, Sherrell, from the quotes, it seems like Mitchell really has a good personality, someone that could fit at Carolina. So I can see why the staff is really prioritizing him.
Oh yeah, he's definitely the type that they gravitate towards. And man, the kid, I mean, I had never talked to him before that phone call, and I was just talking to him, and I was like, halfway through the interview, I think we put it in there. I won't give away too much, but I was like, "What? You seem pretty mature. Where did this come from?" And then we started talking about watching Grays. I was like, "Yeah, you're really mature." So, but he's definitely the type of player that I think they like, both on and off the court. And that's another thing. If you look at the 2022 offers, with him and Sky Clark and Jaden Bradley, they all have a very mature demeanor about them. And it could be because they've been in the limelight since they were freshmen and they kind of get media. But I didn't get that was the impression. I didn't get that impression from them. It just kind of seemed like they are, just good kids. And I know that sounds real cliche, but that's the impression I got.
And then, go ahead, Sean.
One thing you had mentioned, Brizzi and not having UNC in his top 8. I think he was playing in the Big Shots tournament this weekend, which was live streamed. So I need to check in just to see how he did. But perhaps he plays well this weekend and something, there's some movement, but it's got to be a little frustrating for the coaching staffs that would be using this time, especially on seeing new guys. And here you are watching Baller TV, and their automated cameras often don't make it to the full length of the court. So you're like, what did they just shoot it? Did they pat? Like, what happened?
Is that number 7 or number 4? I can't tell.
Man, yeah.
Yeah. So
Recruiting it's going to be wild over the next couple of years, guys. But hey, we'll be here to talk about it. Let's go though and take a very quick commercial break to talk about our friends at John T-Shirt and JohnT-Shirt.com. They're your place to go for Carolina gear. They are your locally owned and operated UNC business. So if you are looking for someone to support during these tough times, make sure that you go to Johnny T-Shirt. You can shop online at JohnT-Shirt.com, where they have tons of sales going on. I know Tommy Ashley talked about them on one of his podcasts recently. I think there was a jersey sale going on. But Johnny T-Shirt and JohnT-Shirt.com, they are constantly putting up sales. They have been an icon there on Franklin Street for decades. Please, please, please support them. They are great friends of Inside Carolina. If you're looking to maybe do some work on the man cave, if you listen to Don and Ross's podcast, they constantly talk about their man caves there. People may have seen some photos of Tommy's man cave as well. So if you have some spare time right now and you're looking for some stuff to add, Johnny T-Shirt has you covered. They have everything that you could possibly want that's UNC related. They also have a very cool thing that just came out. Lee Pace, legendary Tar Heel, just media personality is what I'll call him. But if you don't know who Lee Pace is, please look him up if you're a Tar Heel fan. He has a new book coming out. It's his updated Keenan book. And that's currently being sold exclusively at Johnny T-Shirt and JohnT-Shirt.com. So that is going to be some amazing reading if you need anything to pass the time. Lee Pace's book is a cannot miss for Tar Heel fans. You can pick that up at Johnny T-Shirt, JohnT-Shirt.com. And lastly, don't forget that if you are a subscriber to Inside Carolina, you get 10% off of your orders, either in-store or online. So Johnny T-Shirt and JohnT-Shirt.com, your place to go for Carolina gear. All right, guys, so one other player that had some games, and I think all three of us were able to watch the highlights because one of the posters on Inside Carolina was actually good enough to be present, made a highlight tape and put it on the Premium Basketball message board, which was great. But that is Mr. Dontrez Styles, who is out of the class of 21, local North Carolina kid, UNC commit. And the clip was a couple minutes long. It showed both some good and some bad, which I actually really liked. It wasn't just your standard highlight reel where the kid looks amazing and then you don't see him bricking threes for the next 15 minutes. But I think all three of us came away with a little bit of different impressions. So I'll just let you guys start it off. Sean, when you were watching the footage of Dontrez from over the weekend in the last couple of days, just what was your first impression?
First, it was nice to be able to watch that footage because, especially how quickly it was put up. So thank you very much for the highlight tape. But, if I could have seen Sallis or Mitchell, that would have been like that. That would have been great. But in terms of watching that one in particular, very impressive, I have to say. I mean, I think the knock on him was really shooting form. And I think the stats, and especially in that game, 3 of 4 from 3 and 9 of 10 from the line. So obviously he's been putting in work the last few months on his shooting, skill set. I still think the shot form itself is a little, there's still kind of that hitch a little bit. It seems like, although it was going in, but once again, going in AAU and then going in college are two very different things. But yeah. I think the thing that impressed me the most was some of the plays where he caught it kind of a little, north of the right baseline in kind of a post-up situation and kind of took a few dribbles, either fade away or face up. And there's one move, just in terms of how quick it was, and that was impressive, as well as him getting to the basket. I know we all know he's athletic, but I think just kind of getting to see that again up close was good. And then for me, just trying to picture, all right, how does his skill set fit into Carolina's offense? And, once again, I think that'll be interesting. I think he could be especially on defense, kind of a 4-3, 3-4 on defense. Offensively, probably a little bit of a hybrid as well, especially if he keeps working on his shot. So it was a good highlight to watch, but once again, it's a highlight, but it was nice to see a few missed shots in there as well.
Yeah, what about you, Sherrell? I mean, I guess one of the specific things I noticed were those those turnaround jumpers, the fadeaways. He hit one. I think he missed the other two. But what were your thoughts on his game? Has he gotten better in any area since you were able to see him last?
I think it kind of confirmed to me we I think we already knew. And first, shout out to BKC Hill is the poster who
Thank
posted
you.
the video. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I think it showed, Rob Harrington back in the day. I remember with James Michael McAdoo, he called him a elite utility athlete. And I thought that was just such a perfect description of what McAdoo is, and I think it kind of fits with Styles. And that's not to disparage any parts of his game, but I just see him, like Sean said, defensively, like at 6'6", 6'7", just kind of wreaking havoc on people because he's got the athleticism, he's got the quickness, and he's a tough. People from Kinston consider themselves really, really tough. They're very proud of that, and he's got that mindset. And just again, talking to folks around the UNC program and around Kinston, they talk about how hard the guy plays, how tough he is. Just how much he loves basketball and takes it very seriously. So I think from that aspect, you take that over defensively. I think he has that. And then what we saw offensively, I don't think is too far from what he can be at UNC. I think some of the shots he took had a very high degree of difficulty, and they're not really in the UNC offensive system or playbook unless the shot clock is running down. So I doubt you'll see that. But just the fact that he can hit an open three, I think is good. And that's something that he can improve upon. He had a great drive to drive. I don't know what happened there. I couldn't talk. I couldn't get it out. He had a great drive to the basket with a finish with his left hand. That was really impressive. There were just a couple of really, really skilled moves in there. That
Yeah.
bodes well for him moving forward, and then for UNC too, because you really can deploy him in so many different ways. You can deploy him, like Sean said, as a 3. You can deploy him as a 4. I think we were talking about Jabari Smith in small lineups. He's somebody who could guard as a 5, who could guard somebody who's probably 6'9" or 6'10", because a lot of that is just toughness and grit and willingness to go out and get rebounds. So if there ever came a situation where UNC needed to go really small to match, I think Styles gives them that kind of versatility to be able to do that. And furthermore, when it comes to recruiting, he's like I said before, he's very similar to RJ Davis in that he's coverage. Like he makes sure that no matter what happens in this class, they have someone who can fill a couple of roles. So that allows them or frees them up to go, like we said before, kind of star chasing with guys like Jabari Smith, with guys like Caleb Houstan, with guys like Harrison Ingram and Patrick Baldwin. So I think from that aspect, he's one of those foundational pieces. And the short clips that we saw, I think showed what he can do and showed why he's one of those foundational pieces.
Yeah, I was very impressed with his quickness with the ball. Both of you guys mentioned how he had several moves where he was one-on-one there close to the low block, and a couple times he was able to just go by his guy, lay it up. Then he did have the one turnaround jumper. So, I mean, it is in his repertoire, which is good to see. But overall, it was very impressive from Styles. And the guy who was guarding him, I mean, it was someone that was it looked like, at least to me, right about his size. It wasn't like he was going up against someone that he just had a massive physical advantage over. So the fact that Styles was able to do that, put up those stats, it was really impressive to see. Let me ask you guys this about Styles, and then we'll move on to our final topic here. If there had been more opportunities for evaluators to see him, do you think he would have worked his way up to be one of those guys that was right on that 4 or 5-star line, possibly maybe a low-end 5-star kid? What do you think about that, Sean?
Once again, maybe he explodes and gets into 5 stars, but assuming those are top 20, probably not. I think when he committed, and I forget, Sherrell, do you remember where he was ranked when he committed? I feel it was like 74.
Yeah, I think it was low 70s.
Yeah, and I think the podcast we did that day, I think we both kind of agreed that if spring AAU ball were happening, he could easily be in the top 50. And I still think that is the case. So I would say 4-star for sure in terms of a
Mhm.
higher 4-star, and in that top 50 range is pretty likely. I mean, you look at the once again just the athleticism and kind of the size, and right there you kind of have that. And as Sherrell mentioned, the most important thing is he committed early. So there, all these, discussions, we always kind of leave him out just because he's already committed and we're talking about who are they going to get next. But to have kind of that 3-4-4-3 guy is really important.
Yeah. What's your take on that, Sherrell? Do you think that he would be rising, but not quite to that 5-star level?
Yeah, for sure. And the reason I think so is because a lot of what he did, or a lot of his ranking, was just based on potential.
Mm.
Because last summer, again, like we talked about, he played 17s, and he was pretty young to be playing 17s. And there were times where he frankly looked overmatched, and that's to be expected. But as the season went on, he really started to play better. And then by December, when Evan, who's no longer, not with 24/7 anymore, but when Evan saw him, he was national recruiting director, and Evan just talked about how impressed he was with him when he saw him at the John Wall Invitational in Raleigh in December. And I think that would have just continued. He would have continued to ascend through the rankings because, both on his high school team and coming up with CP3, he was going to be, kind of the guy. And I think he would have put up some big performances, and just his style of play lends itself to doing well on the AAU circuit. So all that to say, I definitely think he would have been like a top 50 guy at worst.
All right, guys, good stuff. Let me go and take our very last commercial break for the national ads, and we will be right back to wrap up the podcast with a update on Caleb Houstan. So stay tuned. We will be right back after this. And we're back with the Inside Carolina Coast to Coast podcast. Jon Seiglie here with Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran, as always. Guys, last part of the podcast here, there was a development with Caleb Houstan, who used to be in the class of 2022. He was one of the top players. I think he was the number 3rd ranked in 22. Now he has reclassified to the class of 2021. We'll have to see where he ends up being ranked within that class. Last I checked, I didn't see where he had been assigned a ranking in there, but he is a power forward guy out of Florida. And I mean, Houstan was someone, I think both of you guys have talked about this on, or you talked about him on a prior Coast to Coast podcast. UNC did offer Houstan, I think back in January. So he was one of those elite guys that Sherrell and Sean both have talked about that the staff has been targeting. Now that he's in the class of 2021, though, I mean, you talk about dominoes, this really does impact a lot of people, such as potentially Jabari Smith. So, Sherrell, when you got the news that Caleb Houstan was going to be reclassifying, I mean, what was the thought process? And was this a situation where was he a younger kid that was playing up a year? In other words, how did he get to the reclassification step?
So he's from Canada, and so there they have a different system as far as class credits and math
Mm-hmm.
credits, and he's been down in Mount Verde Academy for the last 2 years. And typically, players from Canada who come down and spend a couple of years reclass because of that particular credits issue. I don't know exactly what it is, but they almost always do. I'm trying to think of a Canadian player who didn't, and of the ones I can think of, they all did. So I think that was the reason, one of the reasons for the reclass. His family's been thinking about it for a while. When we first talked to them, and after UNC got the offer, we talked to a few people close to UNC program and around Houston, and they said the Carolina offer is good for 2022 or 2021. So that tells you that they already were considering it, or likely knew that was the outcome. They just wanted to confirm it, and that was almost 7.5 months ago. So it's nothing new. And, typically we always tell people when a player reclassifies, they have a school in mind. I think this one's a little different just because of how far out everyone knew the reclass was coming. Like I talked about, 7.5 months ago. So he ruined with Dayron Sharp at Mount Verde. And, he played on arguably the best high school team of all time and started. And he's a tremendous shooter, just very smooth. Again, I'll let Sean get more into the X and O part of it. From a recruiting standpoint, Sean wrote in The Fit about Chet Holmgren, and I guess he'll probably write about Jabari Smith too, just about how the depth chart can be a little concerning if you're a top 15, top 10 player looking to come into Carolina, because there's a lot of depth there. And I think the same is starting to happen on the wing, because if you look at Carolina, you would expect Kerwin Walton to be back as a sophomore. You would expect Puff Johnson to be back as a sophomore, Leaky Black as a senior, and if you want to count Anthony Harris as well, him back as a redshirt sophomore. So that's 4 wings already on the roster right now, and UNC has offers out to Patrick Baldwin, who I guess we can consider a hybrid forward, but or you know, a 3-4, Harrison Ingram already, Trevor Keels, who I guess was kind of a 2-3, and now to Caleb Houstan. So, you know, I could see how for any of those guys, the wing at Carolina looks a little bit crowded. And you talked about Dominoes. You know, if Harrison Ingram picks X school, I think it could have a trickle down effect on Trevor Keels or on Caleb Houstan. Or if Caleb Houstan picks Y school, then what do those other guys do? So I think all of these guys are kind of connected, and because a lot of the same schools are chasing them.
Yeah, and as you both have mentioned as well, there's always the G League as well that I'm sure is going to come after Houston now, seeing as how he was so highly rated. Now, Sean, I described him as a power forward. I was just going off of his profile, but it sounds like he actually, from thinking back on it and how Rel is describing him, is he more of that 3-4 type player? And how do you think he does impact the rest of that 21 class when it comes to those type of guys?
Yeah, I think he likes the wing. So I'd say, even though he is 6'8", or listed at 6'8", at least right now, kind of a 3. I think the interesting thing in terms of his ranking, because when he did reclass, you had a lot of people retweeting ESPN who had him number 3 in their 2022 rankings, and 24/7 actually had him 17, and all of a sudden he reclasses up a year, and now he's number 7 in the rankings. So, usually it's a little tougher to go up when you go up a year, but he skyrocketed. Now, obviously, some of that was just more kind of recalibrating his skill set. And, I think for him, he was able to play in the FIBA. I'm looking at stats right now in the U16s last year. And this was just, on the North America side. So it wasn't, the U17s, what this could have been. But he played really well, averaging almost 23 points per game and 5 rebounds. And, 3-point shooting is supposed to be his strength. He shot 32%. So obviously some room for improvement there. But I think, he'll be a high 30, 40, 40% might be a stretch right off the bat, but he'll be a high 30% 3-point shooter. And I think his shooting is one of his strengths, as well as, once again, is kind of being a smooth wing. So in terms of how that impacts the class, once again, I think it's interesting to look at how Ingram and a Houstan will look at UNC going into that year, where Leaky Black could be potentially going into his 3rd year starting, and have that sealed up, or perhaps, once again, as we talked about, perhaps it's open for competition. And if you're having a top 10 player come in, especially if you're trying to win the championship, maybe that's kind of the fit you need. So I think the top 10 guys won't be as concerned, but at the same time, there might be other spots, especially if it's a one and done wing that's going to the NBA and they see a more straight line to 30 plus minutes. I think that could play in a decision. But UNC was out on him early. Usually you're not saying that, so they were out on him early, and now it'll be interesting to see, does he visit? He has that relationship with Sharp, but I think he's a really good player, really talented player, and a very skilled player. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him.
And the other thing I'd mention too, when it comes to his recruitment, is that his family is not familiar with how recruiting kind of goes. They are learning on the fly, and I think that'll play into it a little bit. The people that they know, they are, Rowan Barrett, RJ's dad, is kind of the czar of Canadian basketball. And so they are very familiar with RJ Barrett, who also went to Mount Vernon and then went to Duke. So Duke is going to be there too. They just offered. I mean, he's going to have all of the blue blood schools, going after him. But I don't think it's a situation where he was, has one school in mind already. I think they truly are open, but just because this process is new and they want to fully understand it, and they want to make sure that he's making a good choice, frankly. And there's a lot of considerations that they are taking into account when they talk to coaches and do Zoom meetings and all the things that all the players are doing now. So I just would add that it's not a situation where he's definitely already picked somewhere just because he reclassified. I think they really are open.
And Sherrell, do you think it's a situation where you're looking at guys like Ingram, like Houstan now, where if the Heels do manage to land the player that they have kind of penciled in into that 3-4 slot, that basically what you'll see is the rest of the guys are going to start taking Carolina off of their lists? I mean, I would imagine, just given like what Sean had said about the depth at the position, that's probably the most realistic thing, is that if the Heels get one of these targets, that's going to be basically it for that one in the 21 class.
Yeah, if they get one, it's a coup. If they get two, I don't know. When does Haley's Comet come again? Like that's how rare it would be. Like, there's just no way they're going to get two of them. So if they get one, I think they should call it a good year and move on. I don't think there's any way. For example, they could get an Ingram and a Houstan. And I say that only because of what we mentioned before. The depth chart is already kind of full with guys who they expect to be around for a couple of years. So there's really just not room for two more, a wing and a combo forward or a wing and a 2-3. They really have room for one.
As long as Archer Davis plays 35 minutes a game, right, Sherrell?
There you go.
All right, you guys, let's go and wrap up the podcast with this. Sean, just wanted to ask you if there are any other tournaments or any other matchups coming up that you think Carolina fans may be aware of. Sherrell, same thing, just opening up to you guys if there's anything else coming up that y'all are aware of that we can let the listeners know about.
As of this moment, I'm not up on the tournaments coming up, but hopefully will be, and we can post those on the message boards. Once again, as I said, I was excited for this weekend to be able to watch some, and it didn't come out like I had hoped, but I think there should at least be some content coming out over the next few days on some of those players. And once again, it's getting a chance to see them against much better competition in AAU compared to high school, and just getting to watch basketball a little bit again. So I'll throw it over to Sherrell to see if there's anything on his radar. But, there probably will be some smaller tournaments. And, once again, hopefully that's just a chance for us to watch some of the guys play.
Yeah, it's funny. This would be one of the live periods coming up this coming weekend. And I think some of the smaller tournaments basically just are keeping what they had. So there's a tournament in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I think there's going to have maybe a UNC target or two. I'm not exactly sure. But besides that, I mean, it seems like everything's just hit or miss. Guys are so there was one tournament that I know that Carolina wanted to watch. And, they've been confirmed on the little, we're going to have UNC virtually watching, blah, blah, blah. And then the couple of players that they really wanted to watch ended up not being at the tournament. So all this stuff is just so hit or miss, just because I think parents are deciding at the last minute whether or not they're going to let their kids play, and then teams are doing the same thing. So it really is just when you see them on the court is when they're confirmed. So as we are able to do that as much as we can, we'll let everyone know on the message board, like Sean said.
And how quickly are you guys going to cancel that subscription to Baller TV or whatever it is after all this is over with?
They're smart and locked us in for 3 months. So
they got Sean's money already. So it's over.
Sorry, Sean's just going to share his password with us, right, Rel? Yeah.
If Baller TV's watching, I don't want them to know that, so I'm not going to comment.
No comment. That's all right.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, Baller TV definitely, I know they got some Dwayne Wade investment money, but they need a little more work on those automated cameras. But at the very least, there are cameras on these games, which, is
it's better than, I guess, absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Well, we'll go and wrap up this week's edition of the Coast to Coast podcast. Thanks a lot for being here with me. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll talk with everyone again soon. Have a good night, y'all.